Hello, Connection Coders, and welcome to the Connection Codes podcast, where we break open our emotions that take us from feeling disconnected to connected in your relationship and with yourself. This episode is a part 2 episode of last week, where we are sharing the health benefits, how it actually affects our minds and our bodies to process our emotion. If you have not listened yet to last week's episode, please do that first. That is where we actually talk about what processing emotion looks like. So I am so excited to dive in. We have 5 incredible points. To wrap up last week, we talked about your cortisol levels, how not processing raises those, and also how intense emotion hinders cognition. So I'm your producer, Tara Wages, and I'm so excited to introduce to you the founders of the Connection Codes, marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis. So here we go.
Hello, world.
Hi,
Welcome.
friends. So we ended last week mentioning that all of this can lead to stopping wars. I love that imagery because for many of us, our family life feels like war. There's no peace. And whether you have children or don't, and just in your marriage relationship, or if you're not married, just feeling like, man, my life. But then also the bigger picture is when I think of war, I think of communities that are at odds. I think of just relational tension, even beyond that and within our world. So I love the research that has come out just in the last couple of years about the 19 seconds. Can you kind of share that with us?
Yeah, well, and the whole idea, and I don't know that we'll be able to stop all wars. I think we can literally stop a lot of them, because if you trace backwards, that war grew out of something. And it is my theory that it was out of an unprocessed emotion. The cycle sped up, became a cyclone, and just magnified. And then we're literally dropping bombs on each other. It's just stunning.
Wow.
So to realize, and you mentioned a couple of years ago, that research came out. And when this research first came out, the very first time, I laughed about it. I read it to you and I was like, this is stupid. They're really missing something. But the conclusion of the research project said that humans are unable to experience an emotion for more than 19 seconds if it's not reactivated. And I read that and I'm like, whoa, they're really missing something. There's some control. They're missing some variable. And my life philosophy is, if somebody says something, I try to listen, try to be kind, patient. But, maybe not everybody has an opinion. If 2 divergent people say something, then I go, that's interesting. And I tune in a little bit. And then if a third the source says it, I go, okay, I must be missing something here. I need to tune in and I get this straight. And again, three different sources can be incorrect, inaccurate, but it at least gets my attention. So that research sometime later was replicated and came up with the same conclusion, 19 seconds. Then it was replicated again, and that particular one said 18 to 19 seconds. So I thought, okay, I must be missing something here, because initially it just didn't make sense to me. So I started researching the research. I started studying the study, and to realize that's actually true. If we're able to process the emotion, if we're able to be safe with each other, and I just think about you and me. If you come to me and you say, I felt hurt by what you said, well, if I resist your energy, in whatever way, but I go, what? No, babe, I didn't mean anything bad by that. That was just, you misunderstood me. Well, I've just reactivated the emotion for you. I've reactivated the hurt. I've reactivated the pain. And now I don't know how long it's going to last. An hour, a day, a week, I have no idea.
Wow.
But if I'm able to be present with you, so you say to me, I felt hurt by what you said. That's the power of the ooh, and I'm literally able to just start with an ooh, the 3 phrases, and I go, oh, shoot, what happened? What did I miss? And then you tell me there's not much more to do beyond that.
Right.
You give me a couple, 3 sentences about how you felt hurt, and I go, oh, shoot. Yeah, well, I get that. I feel some guilt because I brought you pain. That really stinks. It doesn't even matter my intention. Now, if my intention is bad, shame on me. But I may have completely been, quote unquote, innocent in it. I may not have intended anything bad by it. You just felt pain. And when you're able to process that, we're about 19 seconds in. and that's done. So now it doesn't last for a minute, 3 minutes, an hour, a day, a week. Our cycle doesn't speed up. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have another emotion in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour, and that's fine. We'll just process that one then. But it's just remarkable to think that we're 19 seconds from changing the world, 19 seconds from changing this marriage, 19 seconds from changing this relationship with this couple's children, this couple's friends, this couple's neighbors, this individual's parents. And I see that play out all the time. Of course, we get to see it a lot in sessions where it's kind of a controlled environment, but just hearing stories continuously now from around the world of people's lives who are being changed when they're able to process those emotions in 19 seconds.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I think that so often the way we respond to each other and we react to each other, it's like there's these rules that we've come up with where we have to defend ourselves. Like when you even use the example, if I say to you, I felt hurt by what you said, it's like the reaction so often is in relationships, I didn't mean it. So that's kind of that first defense, I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
Or, accusation, which would be, well, you misunderstood me.
Yep.
So then that throws it back on the other person in an accusation. Or, there's, of course, many other reactions instead of just making space for the fact that you felt hurt. And I think that that's where we so often miss each other. I was thinking of a scenario recently where, a couple was sharing with us that she said to him, I feel so overwhelmed by everything I have to get done by May. And he responded by logistically trying to explain to her that she has plenty of time, plenty of help. There's no reason for her to be overwhelmed. Well, she felt so judged in that. So they had the huge fight. And, when you put all of those ingredients on the table and you look at that, you go, whoa, those ingredients shouldn't have led to a fight. And yet this is what we do in a relationship. It's like we barely miss each other. And it's that 19 seconds. If I can hold space for what you're experiencing for 19 seconds, it's incredible to think that then releases from your body. That emotion has time to be released from your body, and you can feel it, physically feel it. You felt heard by the other person. That's the opposite of feeling judged, feeling accused. And so that's the whole 19 seconds. And I love that, to think we so desperately need that. And our bodies need that, which is part of, this week's episode is just talking about how emotions can negatively affect our bodies. So talk to us about how co-regulation uses 80% less glucose than self-regulation. What does that mean?
Yeah, and there's some remarkable researchers. Dr. Jim Cohn is just a genius as far as because it's, as we said last week, it's so difficult to determine causation, to figure out human behavior, because humans are so complex. With chemists, you do a research one time, it's like, there, we got it. We know that 2 particles of hydrogen plus 1 particle of oxygen equals water. We don't have to do that 1,000 times to figure out if it's true or not. Humans are far more complex than that. So these research projects are very difficult to isolate. Dr. Jim Cohn, Dr. House, Dr. Steve Case are just brilliant at doing this research to try to figure out what causes humans to function the way that they do. But one of the takeaways from some of that research is that co-regulation, so when we're together, when we can co-regulate this experience together, uses 80% less glucose. Well, what difference does that make? Well, glucose is what runs the brain, and the brain is what runs the body. So we're frequently, when we're self-regulating, we're burning through fuel so fast and we're exhausted. And you talk to people all the time. I think the majority of people are exhausted most of the time. They're just worn out. Because the equivalent of that, if you just do the math, you've been getting 30 miles to the gallon in your car, and all of a sudden you start getting 150 miles to the mile in your car, and you're just like, babe, I filled up with gas like a month ago, and I still have like an eighth of a tank. I don't even understand what's happening here. Because you're not burning through the fuel. Conversely, if you've been getting 30 miles to the gallon and all of a sudden you start getting 6 miles to the gallon, you're like, dang, I filled up with gas yesterday morning. I think I'm going to have to fill up again tomorrow morning. I don't know what's happening with my car. I'm burning through fuel so fast. Well, that's the equivalent of what's happening with the human. They're burning through glucose so fast. The big story for us several years ago, I love what I do, and I had an office in Brentwood, Tennessee, and I was usually the last person at my office, especially in the wintertime. It would get dark, and so by the time I'm leaving, it would be dark, and my car is the only one in the parking lot. And it would have made a great video on YouTube because here I am, this trained professional, and I would leave out the back door, start walking to my car, and I would end up just sprinting to my car because there's a group of people in the back parking lot that have like chainsaws and machetes and pitchforks and stuff. I've never actually seen them, but I'm convinced that they're there. And I would just get so flooded with fear that these people are going to attack me, cut me up into little pieces, and that would be my demise. And when I shared that with you one day, and you said, babe, why don't you just call me when you're leaving your building? And I was just so struck by that because I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to call you, and now these people are going to attack me with their chainsaws and machetes and chop me up into small pieces. So you will get to hear my screams as they're doing that. Or you could call 911, and 911 responders will be able to get there in time to sweep up the pieces of my body that are laying on the ground. And so it actually doesn't accomplish anything as far as logistically for me to call you. You're not going to be able to do anything. All you'll be able to do is to hear my death. So I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. And you assured me that it was worth doing. So I called you, and it was amazing. Those people never bothered me again.
Yeah.
Well, that's because I'm co-regulating it. I'm with someone else, someone who I'm safe with, that I trust so tremendously. And so we would talk on the phone for, whatever, a minute, 2 minutes. I get in my car, and those people don't bother me at all. And it's just stunning to me. Of course, one of the case studies I'm most fascinated by is myself, that this individual doesn't get hit with fear because I'm on the phone with my friend. I'm on the phone with my partner. It doesn't change anything logistically. My car is still in the back parking lot. It's still dark. Everything's the same, but it changes my emotional experience because I'm co-regulating it with you. So the fear is either virtually nothing or doesn't even exist at all. That's just remarkable to think how much effect that has on me in that moment.
Well, it's interesting. I'm hearing the word exhaustion, and man, to think how many of us feel exhausted. And it's interesting because I think about that just talking among my friends, how often I hear that term, wow, I'm so exhausted. And I think that we think, well, you need more sleep. So if you just go to bed a little earlier or sleep in a little longer, but really from just what you've just shared as far as our glucose levels, and you go, okay, so we are given X amount of energy a day. And if that energy is used up, even in the first few hours of the day, maybe even the first few minutes of the day, it's like, well, then you're tired all day long. And I think that is so powerful in so many examples in life where the co-regulating, like to have someone to partner with, that you're talking through the emotions of the day as the day progresses. So I know for me, just, that is like, wow. 'Cause I think back in the day, before I tuned into my emotions, I dealt with everything on my own. Like that was part of what I considered my strength, is just grin and bear it and do it and get the task done. And I remember that I would hit an incredible wall every single afternoon of just exhaustion. And I leaned into naps. Like I was like, let me take a nap. And, there was that term power nap that I remember others who could just do a 20-minute power nap and they would have it. I would be like, dude, give me 2 hours.
Right.
And then I would wake up tireder after my nap. So it was this battle that I always had within myself where I was exhausted and if I had simply known that it was because I was self-regulating, I was not co-regulating with you or anyone else. Like I just kept it all inside myself. And so my glucose levels were constantly falling. So that's really something I think for all of us to really lean into is, wow, we've got to be co-regulating, which of course that starts with tuning into yourself, getting familiar with your own voice to be able to go, okay, what are my emotions? Because to co-regulate with you, I have to know what I'm regulating, which is my emotions, which means I have to learn to tune in to my emotions. So that's really, really powerful. And, I thought about this even with just the fact that loneliness is so damaging to ourselves. And if you go, wow, so self-regulating, that means really there's a lot of loneliness in that, and that loneliness is so damaging. Talk about the study that has come out on just the damage of loneliness.
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention back to as far as sleep goes, because it's stunning to some of the research that says that the human body needs a certain amount of sleep every night, and people are like, oh, it's probably about 8 hours. The human body needs about 2 hours of sleep a night. It's our psyche that needs so much time to recalibrate. Large mammals don't sleep much, but you think about, take a cow. So a cow at the end of the day is going, what have I got going on tomorrow? I'm going to eat some grass. Well, that's about it. I got my day set tomorrow. Humans are on the other end of the spectrum where we've got so many things going on. And so our psyche needs all this time to rest. It needs all this time to recalibrate our neurotransmitters, our hormones, so many aspects of our bodies, because we're such complex beings. So when we're able to fall asleep at night, again, our goal is not to get people to try to sleep 2 hours a night, but as you mentioned, tons of people are tireder when they wake up in the morning than they were when they went to bed.
Yeah.
And they're like, shoot, I slept all night and I still feel exhausted. Well, that's because their psyche was activated all night long. It didn't have time to recuperate, didn't have the situation to reset. So when we don't co-regulate, when we don't have the connection, when we don't have the safety to do that, we end up living in non-connection or disconnection, which we reference as loneliness. And it's amazing some of the research that has come out that's been replicated a bunch of times. And a lot of these are longitudinal studies, which, as we mentioned last week, longitudinal studies have so much more efficacy than latitudinal studies. But one of the first projects that came out was with the Happiness Institute out of Denmark. And says one of their conclusions was that living in loneliness is more damaging to your health than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
That is stunning if there's accuracy to that conclusion, because you think about what we've done culturally, the anti-tobacco campaign. I was a kid whenever it kind of kicked in. And we're not trying to sell cigarettes here. That's not the point. But we have really focused in. We're like, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke. You can't smoke, don't dip, don't do anything with tobacco, which, again, is fine. I'm 100% for that. Neither you and I don't smoke. So I'm not trying to get people to start smoking. But it's actually more damaging to your health to live in loneliness. So what that says is, if Phyllis and Glenn live connected, we don't experience ongoing loneliness, and we each smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, we're winning. That's a win. Well, culturally, people gasp and are like, oh, what are you talking about? That's insane. They should never smoke cigarettes. But that's what the research actually tells us. Conversely, if we would never touch tobacco, we would never smoke cigarettes. Oh my gosh, no. Are you crazy? That's bad for you. We would never do that. But we live in loneliness. We live in disconnection. We don't have a connected relationship. We lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, culturally, that's stunning. So my dream is that we get, again, not in any way supporting tobacco smoking here, but my dream is that we get that focused on loneliness. We get that focused on connection, to have a campaign, an anti-loneliness campaign, an anti-disconnection campaign where we get laser focused on this. And of course, that's what the Connection Codes is all about.
Yeah.
That is our campaign. We're trying to change the world. We're trying to reach 8 billion people and help them get connected. And people are not connected. People are not disconnected because they want to be.
Right.
They just don't know how. They don't need better intentions. They need better tools. And of course, that's what the Connection Codes is all about.
Well, in explaining the word loneliness or lonely, I know that for so long I had really the wrong definition, because I remember really resisting that one and going, lonely? I love being all by myself. I don't mind being at home alone. I don't mind, and I think that for a lot of people, they go, oh yeah, I crave time alone, but that is there's more to loneliness. And to realize that often there are people even in a room full of people and that person is lonely. So it is not an actual, if you're just in a room with a bunch of people, or you go to a coffee shop and sit and you're surrounded by people, you're the opposite of lonely. That people within a family can be lonely. And so it's tuning in to that deeper version of lonely, and to realize, just like I can experience lonely in a project where I'm like, okay, I feel all alone. I feel totally responsible. And even with your role within a family, if there's only one breadwinner, then the breadwinner of the family may feel really alone in that, carry a lot of responsibility. And so that's one of the emotions that we need to be aware of and really tune into and kind of connect. I think there's times, take a young mom. She's had a baby. She feels alone in that. She feels 100% responsible for the baby's care. Yeah. And can be loneliness in that. Yeah. So I think it helps to redefine that and to realize that can be damaging. So take the young mom. And it's kind of like in our society, even things have changed so much where we don't always have the family support that used to be in for young families. And so to go, wow, she's now caring for that child. She's all alone in that. She feels all alone in that. And, it's so important to process that so that you don't end up just damaging yourself in that season where you feel so alone. It's the processing, it's the identifying that, and that is so important, and being able to share that, which goes back to the co-regulating with someone. So it may, it's like finding that safe person and being able to talk through and express how lonely you feel in this. And it's, I think sometimes if I said to you, I'm just a general statement of, I'm feeling lonely, or I might say that to a friend, the immediate response may be, oh, well, let's go have coffee. What's your schedule? Again, that's not always the thing, right? It's just, I just need to process the lonely. I've still got to do the thing, I've still got to do that project. I've still got to get that done, or I'm still the one responsible for this newborn baby, but it's just the importance of being able to share that and to get that out of your body so you don't hold that in. And I think too, just as a society, for everyone listening today, look around, make sure that that you're tuning in to people. I immediately think about a classroom, a teacher with, 20 students, and you see that one that's always by themselves and they're more the outcast, like to see how damaging that is to them. And, that's where you go into even using the tools, what's happening, to find out what's happening with that kid that is always alone and, that they're isolated, they're different, and sadly, among kids, especially I think as they get older, little kids don't seem to have those prejudices. But as kids start to get older, they begin to form prejudices and they can leave someone out that loneliness is so damaging.
Yeah.
And for us to really tune into that is so important.
Yeah, when we spoke at a church this a couple of weeks ago, we just looked out in the audience. We said, if somebody lit up a cigarette right now indoors, everybody would notice. They'd be like, what the heck is happening here?
So true.
Somebody's smoking a cigarette. And we would all be startled by that. And most people would be concerned about it. Well, to have that same awareness of loneliness, because as we looked out into a crowd of several hundred people, I'm like, there are some people in here who are very, very lonely. Yeah. They're experiencing a lot of loneliness, which is actually more damaging to them than if they're lighting up a cigarette. So we're really, and again, not supporting the tobacco industry, but we're really imbalanced in this culturally, as a society, to not even be aware of that. And also, just to emphasize that, the brain, for humans, the brain doesn't distinguish between physical pain and emotional pain. So loneliness fires in the pain region of the brain. So living in loneliness, you're living in this dull, aching pain continuously for those who are in continuous loneliness. And pain is exhausting. Yeah. It wears you out. Of course, raises your cortisol levels and all the things that ends up resulting in. So for us to become more and more aware of this, but again, the individual needs to become aware of it and develop safe relationships where they're able to say, I feel lonely right now. And, we talk about the 3 phrases for the person to be able to respond, what's happening with lonely? What am I missing? And then after all that emotions processed, to be able to go, so how could I help with that? What we call the 4th phrase. Yeah. What do you need? There, and then they end up co-regulating together, and it's amazing the difference. What happens over the next 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, and which of course ends up equaling a life. Yeah.
Well, I love the way this is kind of building on it. Each one builds on the other. I do want to state, you may be living in a marriage where you feel lonely in the marriage, and again, it goes back to, it's not that you are like a human living on an island, and that it's that you can be surrounded by people, and it can be just a spouse, and in that marriage you feel lonely, and to realize how damaging that is, and that you've got to be able to express what's happening for you. And we started off with the 19 seconds, and it's like, so often we don't feel heard because our partner responds in such a way. They're either trying to fix this, or they're trying to smooth things over, or they're denying, or they're all about defending themselves. And so we lose each other in 19 seconds. So quickly we lose each other. And then, the whole co-regulating and using less glucose, how important that is. And then, we're talking about loneliness. And so, wow, they just flow. One flows into the other. The compassionate touch makes ourselves healthier is the next part that we want to talk about. And just, wow, that study I think is phenomenal, and how powerful just the human touch is. Which is in marriage, yes, in family, with kids, it's so important. And then in a society, can you expound on just that?
Yeah, and there's so much research on this, some of it from some pretty horrendous sources, and this has accumulated over the last century. Seeing the effects of a lack of touch. And this is true for all humans, but you especially see it with infants and with older people. And infants can actually die from lack of touch, which they can have all the nutrition that they need. They have plenty of water. They're not freezing to death, but they literally just begin to deteriorate and actually can die from a lack of touch. We are social creatures. We are set up that way. And of course, that's the first slide in the Connection Codes Foundation's e-course, is that humans are not designed to live independently. We are designed to be interdependent. There are species that just live their lives alone. There are species that never even see their parents. They're just born and they're on their own. Humans are not that way. We are designed to be in community and teamship and connection. Again, we don't need better intentions. We need better tools, because so many people have no idea how to do this effectively, especially day to day. They may experience it, a couple times a year or something, sitting around a campfire, but they don't know how to live that way.
So explain just the actual compassionate touch, like just the power of that, and how that literally affects the cells in your
Right.
body.
Well, some of that's just our coding. We don't necessarily know why that is or how that is. It just is. But literally, when we touch each other, the cells in that area of our body react. If they had emojis, they'd have a smiley face on them. And again, as long as it's compassion touch, as long as you're not afraid of me, if there's fear in it, well, that's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
But if you experience it as compassionate touch, it makes your cells healthier. It makes them more permeable to water. It makes them just flow better. And the trick is that connection and compassion and touch are reciprocal. So if you and I are not connected, you don't want me to touch you. And if I don't touch you, well, then we end up not connected. And it's just this terrible pattern, this terrible cycle that just makes it more and more detrimental to our health. And you'll see that, of course, we see that a lot in our private sessions, is that, whichever, but let's say it's a married couple, and, the husband feels wounded, feels hurt by the wife, and she reaches to touch him, he literally will lean away from her because he doesn't feel safe with her. He doesn't think that it's compassionate touch. The brain doesn't distinguish physical from emotional pain. So she's now a pain source. And again, she may not be intending anything negative at all, but he actually will pull away from her because he doesn't feel connected with her. And then, of course, we're really good at helping people process through that. And then literally 2 minutes later, she reaches to touch him and he lets her because he feels safe with her. And that compassionate touch becomes even more connecting, which of course leads into deeper connection, which leads to deeper compassionate touch. It's a beautiful cycle.
I love that point, because I think about that just in relationships in general, that we need to touch each other. And I think about that among senior citizens who, have lost a lot in, and even just, I grew up in a culture where, you would see someone and you would hug them. And I even think about just in my church culture where there was like the sideways hug, because, that's more acceptable than the front hug. And it's nothing wrong with that. But to me, sometimes it's more power just in that actual touch of my hand on your arm, and not just a quick hug, but there's so much power in laying your hand on someone's arm, on their shoulder, and to connect and realize this is affecting my cells, and to realize there's so much power in that science. And whether you're dealing even with children, I think it calms them, and you did mention if you don't feel safe with someone, that's not the case. Right. And I thought about that time we were downtown and we were going to the symphony, and we were in a big old parking garage, and we came across two elderly ladies, and they were confused. They didn't know how to get themselves out of the garage. Right. And I touched one of them. I touched her arm, and I said, "Can we help you?" And it's like I just saw her physically calm down. Yeah. And she said, "Well, we don't know how to get out, and we're trying to go to the symphony." And I said, "Well, we're going to the symphony, and we would love to show you." Yeah. But I was so amazed that she trusted us. But I also knew that study that had come out about the compassionate touch, in that in my touch of her arm, and it's like I just saw her whole body, relax. And I think that we underestimate, and I almost feel like even as a society, we kind of, well, I'm not touchy-feely. We kind of have these, well, I'm just not a touchy-feely person. Yeah. And it's like, oh my goodness, we all need touch.
Yeah, if you're human, you're supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
somehow you got knocked off course at some point in your life. Yeah. But we actually really, really need that from each other. Yeah. And, there's even, you've heard this, well, I'm an introvert, well, I'm an extrovert. And it's like, well, somewhere we got knocked off course because
Right.
we actually need each other.
Yeah.
We all need each other. I think we can get exhausted by each other, especially if we're not being authentic
Right.
with each
Yeah.
other. And
Yeah.
that's where you kind of go, well, I'm not a people person.
Mm.
It's like, well, when you were little, when you were 12 months old, you were definitely a people person.
Yeah.
You were crying out for people.
Yeah.
And, it's somewhere we get knocked off course. And so, but I love that idea, that compassionate touch, that what it brings to us is so important. And all of this is kind of tied together, right? We're talking about emotion, and we're talking about how to be like processing, how to be authentic in our emotion, and talk about how unprocessed emotion facilitates debilitating illnesses.
Yeah, there's so much research
Such
now.
a big one.
Yeah. And again, longitudinal studies, 30-year studies that are reaching the same conclusions. And there's a mounting body of evidence that says that unprocessed emotion facilitates debilitating illnesses as well as psychological disorders, which includes addictions. And just to consider that, oh my gosh, all that stuff originates with unprocessed emotions. Now, again, very difficult to prove causation, to know for certain that, oh, this caused this equals this. We can't really do that with humans because humans are so complex. But to realize that that's at least an ingredient, that's at least a factor, these unprocessed emotions. We mentioned last week the wolf. You're living with the wolf. You're living with this stressor that's just always there. It may not be gnawing at your throat, but it's always there. It's always on top of you. It's always present with you. It breaks down your immune system. And now your immune system is not going to fight that disease that it normally would be able to handle.
Yeah.
Specifically with cancers. The human body is designed to heal itself. And everybody has cancer. We all have cancer. Cancer is simply a misreplicated cell. Now, most of those cells die. They're not viable. And the ones that we have trillions and trillions of cells in our body. So if you have one cancerous cell, well, whoop-de-doo, that's 0%. Nobody cares. And then when the ones that are able to survive, it replicates itself. Well, now you have two cancer cells. No big deal. And they double, 4, 8, 16. Our whole body replicates itself about every 7 years, sometimes even less than that. So for you couples out there, if she says you're not the man that I married, well, if you've been married over 7 years, that's true. You're a completely new human. But when those numbers get bigger, and again, it starts out 1, it doubles to 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, you do the math, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it has to get up to a really big number to matter because you have trillions of cells in your body. But when your immune system is distracted with a wolf, with a big stressor, with that continuous stress, it doesn't pay attention because at some point when the number gets big enough, your immune system is supposed to say, clean up on aisle 9, go beat up the cancer, and it just deals with it. It can handle it. It just crushes the cancer. So when the immune system is distracted with the cleanup on aisle 9 or a bigger thing where the whole store has been flooded and you have to clean up everything, well, then by the time the immune system gets back to that mess, it's too big. And that's when your doctor says to you, you have cancer. In reality, you've had cancer the whole time, whatever, for 10 years. But whenever it gets so big, whenever it gets so unmanageable, that's when we notice it. And I'm not saying the doctor is doing that on purpose. It's just now it's noticeable and the body can't catch up. And that's when we do external things. But if the body is set up properly and is able to manage, if the immune system is really functioning, it just gets rid of. And I'm talking about diseases like Parkinson's, fibromyalgia. It's a long, long, long list. Hypertension, of course, heart attacks. So many of those, if you trace them back, which is very, very difficult to do, but if you keep tracing them backwards, you find unprocessed emotion. That was the origin of that.
There's times that we set ourselves up. I'm thinking back to when our third child was born. We moved when she was a month old.
Yeah. Wow.
And we moved from the East Coast back to South Carolina. And, I remember right as we were going to the airport, I guess for, 24 hours, felt really sick, 48 hours, I don't know. But we decided to stop in at a clinic, and they said, "Oh, you have strep throat." And it makes so much sense when you think about birth. Birthing a baby alone is such a stressor on your body, your mind, your emotions, like everything. And then to go, oh, and now you're going to move in less than a month from the date of her birth. And my body was like, too many wolves in the room, too much stress. And so my immune system was so compromised.
Right.
And I think at that point in our lives, we didn't understand any of this science. We didn't understand any of it. And I was definitely not processing my emotions. And so my body just couldn't handle it. And I got really sick. And, there's different times where we really do set ourselves up really poorly. Yeah. So it's almost like inviting the wolf in. Like we say, and talk about the scale that, you're only supposed to have. Like what scale is that?
Right,
one?
the Holmes Rae Scale. There's two psychologists back in the 70s that just kind of put it together a list, and of course life has changed a good bit in the last half century. But so they just kind of listed out life events and went through and put a number 1 to 100 on them. And their conclusion was you should never go over 300 points in any running 12-month period, not January through December, but any 12-month period. And the reality is many of us are operating at 40, 50, or 400, 500, 600 points on the Holmes Rae Scale all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. And that's so damaging. I think about, for us, 2013, which was pre-connection codes. That's when we were first starting to really get into the research on this. But I got shingles that year. Yeah. And that's a lie, because I'd had shingles since I was a child, since I got the chicken pox, because it's the same virus. So it had been going through my bloodstream for decades. No big deal. You can't get rid of it. It's just in there. Yeah. It's in amongst your blood. I'd have to get rid of all my blood to get rid of the shingles virus. But in 2013, one of, if not the most stressful year of my life, and I didn't process it, certainly didn't process it well, maybe didn't process it at all. Yeah. And my immune system broke down. And so then I had the shingles, and I just X'd out 5 weeks of my life, because that was one of the most harrowing experiences I've ever had. Just for the record, I do not recommend shingles if you're contemplating it. Yeah. It's not a good idea.
Well, you had a pretty extreme case, because it was in your head and went into your face, your eye, and your nose. So it was, very, very scary. But that's such a good point, that in that situation, because we didn't process all the emotion and there was so much change. Right. And I appreciated the one doctor that we went to, because he talked about just the emotion, like you needing to talk and talk through. And I thought, wow, no one had ever touched that before.
Had no idea.
Didn't know. And that you were still not releasing it. So he wanted you to release it. And he gave very specific assignments every time you were awake, which wasn't often during those weeks. But because you were in the dark all the time, literally, because it hurt your eyes so much. But the fact that every time I could, to get you to speak and to talk through these emotions was so huge. And so, I love today's episode, and just realizing that, man, our bodies, we need to tune in, and we need to realize that we've been created. Our bodies were created to be strong and to fight and to show up for itself. But we have to acknowledge that. And it goes back to the emotional health that so many of us don't understand. Yeah. And we've really lost ourselves in that.
And I wanted to mention the one thing, because I referenced addictions. The human organism is designed to take care of itself, to protect itself. Well, no human would become addicted to something that's damaging to them. That doesn't make any sense. That's illogical. Well, until you reference back that intense emotion shut down cognition. So if you talk to this, pick an age, this 10-year-old, this 15-year-old, this 20-year-old, I've never talked to a 10-year-old and said, well, my dream for my life is that I become an alcoholic. That's my
Right,
goal, is
right.
just to completely wreck my life, my relationships, my work, my everything by being an alcoholic or a meth addict or whatever. Nobody does that. But through unprocessed emotion, we end up becoming dumber versions of ourselves, and then we end up turning
Wow.
to the things that are actually going to be to our detriment. And again, that's true for tons of things. Some addictions we actually kind of admire. I know people that are addicted to running. Well, they're doing that because they have all this unprocessed emotion that is strangling them, and they just get out and run. I'm not against running at all. Well, actually, I am. Because I have a car, I'd rather drive. But okay, sorry, don't get mad at me. Phyllis and all of her friends are runners, but anyway, or used to be at least. So, but a lot of people do some of these things, and we just admire them. We're like, oh, that's amazing. He's a triathlete. She's she does all these crazy races. But a lot of times that's actually out of an addiction, but we admire that addiction. Whereas if they're over here just drinking whiskey all the time, well, we think that's bad. Well, it's the same thing that's causing it. And again, I get it. Running is better for you than drinking a ton of whiskey, but it's actually the same unprocessed emotion, the same setup that's pushing this behavior. So addictions actually are simply a way to deal with the unprocessed emotion. And of course, in our working with people so much, we see that once they get good at processing the emotion, the addiction goes away.
Wow.
It's remarkable. And it's not that simple. I'm not saying that it's magical and all of a sudden Thursday at 6, it's all going to be taken care of. But once people learn to process emotion, the need, the craving for the addiction dissipates drastically.
Wow.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. So much of this, gosh, there are moments of it that I can relate to different parts of my life. And then also just think about people that I really care about that are struggling with addiction. So many of us have someone that we love that is currently in the trenches, and just learning to process that emotion and how much that can change each of us individually is incredible. And then it translates into our relationships, which is just awesome. So recognizing that humans are not able to experience emotion for more than 19 seconds, if it's not reactivated, processing that emotion can help it so much. And then co-regulation, so actually doing it with someone, uses 80% less glucose than self-regulation. And living in loneliness is more damaging to your health than smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. That is just honestly mind-blowing, because I agree. The movement for the anti-tobacco when I was a little kid, that was huge, huge. And then compassionate touch actually makes our cells healthier. That is so beautiful, how our bodies are made. And then finally, that unprocessed emotion facilitates debilitating illness, including psychological disorders that includes addiction. So processing emotion changes our entire life, our entire being. And so it is so important to access, identify, and verbalize our emotions. So Dr. Glenn and Phyllis, can you show us what that looks like by using our core emotion wheel? Process our emotion, and let's learn from that.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go first?
That'd be great.
All right. Felt a lot of fear yesterday driving in a torrential downpour and passing that truck, and it just blinded us. Felt a lot of fear in that moment. Feeling a lot of joy about going to the movies with you tonight. Guilt that I booked the wrong Airbnb and ended up in the wrong city. Felt a lot of guilt about that. Shame, just have been hit with shame that I've gotten off track from my goals, especially the walking and hiking goals. Can't quite figure out how to balance life right now. Lonely. I felt lonely recently when some of my friends went on a girls' trip and they didn't invite me. And it hit me when I saw pictures on Instagram. And I'm like, I want to be there with you. And I wasn't invited. Anger that just recently our contractor, he messed up our order, and felt a lot about that.
Yeah.
Really ended up creating a lot more work for me to straighten all that out.
Wow.
Felt hurt when you interrupted me yesterday, and I feel like you have more words than I do, and when I get sharing, and it's like, don't interrupt. Felt hurt in that. Feel some sadness that there's a bunch of road work going on today right outside this building.
I get that.
Maybe that's combined with some fear that it's really loud. It is really loud. I'm just hoping that it's not coming through the mics. But yep.
Wow, that's cool. Amazing. For me, I felt some hurt yesterday with a client that she said that she didn't trust me. That was kind of painful. And then I felt some guilt. She said she felt attacked by me, and I realized that I just missed with her. I went too far, too fast, and I had to really slow down with her. I felt some anger over that too, like, oh, dang, I've been doing this a long time. I should be able to nail it every time. I got to pay more attention, be more tuned in, a lot of times, especially when we do session after session after session, because you always have to shift gears for this individual, for this couple, because you can't, because every couple's unique. And I was really glad you were there. I felt a lot of joy about that, because you were able to fill in some gaps that I just really missed. And it, got turned around in just a few minutes. A big part of that because you were able to kind of monitor that and be aware of it. And I'm so thankful. I just love that, having a partner who's in it with me. I felt some shame for this episode putting on this cardigan, because I couldn't figure out if the cardigan had shrunk or if I just got fatter. I wasn't sure which it was. Or maybe I'm bloated or something. So I hope the cardigan shrunk. I'm not sure. Felt some loneliness in a group meeting the other day. I don't know, just didn't feel seen, didn't feel heard, didn't feel valued in it at all. It's just a kind of a yucky feeling. Feel some fear with the connection codes. I mean, it's just wide open. And I'm like, my goodness, there is not one day where we could get everything done that's on the list.
That's true.
Because it's just so much, which is awesome. But I'm thinking, shoot, are we going to be able to keep up? And our systems in place to handle this, because right now we get a certain number of emails a day. Well, that's increasing regularly. And a year from now, we're going to be getting 10x that many. And do we have the systems in place to handle it?
Wow.
And I felt some sadness. Mom's out of town for several weeks. Went to Florida because it's too cold where we are. And just some sadness for her, just how much is she going to be alone? Hopefully she'll be connecting with people all the time, in the park where she is. But just kind of felt some sadness for her. For those who don't know, my 94-year-old mother lives with us. So she's quite a character. But she hates the cold, so she goes to Florida every winter for a bit. So just thinking about her situation.
Wow. Thanks.
Thank y'all so much for sharing that. I always connect to hearing you share with each other, but also it's so good to recognize how we listen to each other, seeing how deeply you listen to each other. And even though you're able to vocalize like, hey, I felt some sadness that you interrupted me, or so often we get so defensive, just like you had mentioned earlier, Phyllis, and just having that moment to realize like, okay, this is their pain that they are feeling. And it's just my job to listen and be here with them. It's just so beautiful. I think many of us miss that in our marriage. So if you are listening to this and wanting to not be stuck, where you're at in this cycle of unprocessed emotion in your own life, you can go to connectioncodes.co and find out more about Dr. Glenn and Phyllis. There they have e-courses available to you. Their foundation course teaches you everything about how to process your emotion with your partner. And it is so much deeper I mean, this is one piece of it. This is a
Right.
piece of the puzzle. There's so much more of how we give each other identity and we show up for each other. So you can go there and find their Connection Codes Foundations course. You can also book a private session with the two of them. It's just, I've done it myself. That is one of the ways that we met early on, and it was so instrumental and beautiful. So thank you all for being here. If you have not already shared this podcast with your friends, please do so. Give us a 5-star review and also hit subscribe. That is the easiest way to get notified that there are new podcasts that are live. And I recognize and realize today that we have not shared that this podcast is also being videoed. It is on YouTube, available for you to watch. And so you can find that there, and there will be a link. If you're listening to this on your podcasting app, there will be a link that'll go straight to the YouTube channel so you can find it. So thank you again, and let's close it out, guys.
Yeah, you need this.
You deserve this.
Let's do this.
Let's do this. Thank y'all.